From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, the other big news that came out today, this was involving Melvin Gordon, as his DUI case was dismissed in court, and he only had to plead guilty to a reckless driving for excessive speeding, which was 8 points, but he will not have any charges brought against him for his alleged DUI, and that, of course, will also not lead, as we expect, to a suspension. Now, sometimes the NFL historically has not always said that it will completely line up with what is happening necessarily with the courts. If they feel like a player still broke the law or at least made the shield look bad, then they still might levy some kind of suspension. But in this case, it doesn't seem very likely for Melvin Gordon. This also means that the Broncos will not be foregoing his guarantees, and Melvin Gordon will be on this roster next year.
Right. It won't be a suspension handed down from the league. If anything, it'd be a fine. I'll say that. His guarantees are now, the Broncos can't come after any money for that and void his guarantees. And obviously avoiding suspension, I think, was the biggest aspect in terms of on the field, because they had big plans for him this season, and I think that finally, it's going to really clarify that Phil Lindsay situation. It's now down to do you want to keep him or not? At this point, it's not we don't have bodies. It's do you want to keep him? And so now you're at the point where you need to make that decision. You know, do you hold on to him one more year because they're not going to pay him long term? Mm-hmm. So do you hold on to him one more year with the RFA tag or what?
Right. And so that is basically the very next point that you almost have to get to, because if you were going to go second round tender on Phillip Lindsay, it was going to be around $3.3 million that you were going to be giving him. And of course, that means he's definitely coming back. And if that was the case, $3.3 million there, you're going to be paying Melvin Gordon $8 million right now that's coming up this next year. So, the Phillip Lindsay would be, you would be adding significant to the room, or you could go into free agency, I guess, technically, or you can go into the draft, which seems like the more likely scenario because Royce Freeman is still on this roster. Mm-hmm. So, you're coming down to that decision. Does this mean, in your opinion, knowing that we for sure are going to have Melvin Gordon back, knowing that for sure he is not going to serve a suspension, that the Broncos are more likely than not, are we tipping the scale a little bit, to give him an original round tender, allowing him to test?
Yeah, I think it's less likely that Phil Lindsay is back because of this. I truly do. He doesn't really fit what they do. Phil Lindsay is an outside zone runner, and he needs an outside zone scheme. They just don't do that in this offense. You know, the toss, the outside, those just don't exist. If they're going to do something out there, you're throwing a swing pass out there to the back. And Phil has had problems catching the ball in the pros for whatever reason. You know, he didn't have problems in college, but you get the pro game, he's having some problems catching the football. And so
he had the wrist ailment there.
He did, and that's part of it. But the whole thing can't be blamed on. He's had some issues. Where Royce has really not, and Melvin Gordon has not, and that's a fundamental feature, a staple of Pat Shurmur offense, is the running backs attacking those flats. So, it's entirely possible that you could see the Broncos move on from Phil Lindsay and wind up with, somebody who is better in pass pro and can catch a ball out of the backfield, because the running portion of it is almost kind of ancillary, in Pat Shurmur's offense. If you can run for, 4 yards, if you can get 4.0, you're fine. The rest of it, it's kind of superfluous. So, and you go back and you look at Melvin Gordon's average last year. That was the second best per carry year for him of his career. I think Melvin Gordon is what they're looking at. If he can get rid of the fumbles, then they're good with him, and then find somebody that's a little bit bigger than Phil Lindsay. You can't have a guy who weighs $170 in the backfield trying to protect you from a guy who weighs 270 barreling down on your quarterback.
We saw that multiple times, unfortunately, for Phil. And again, he's a fan favorite. He's a guy that's very easy to root for, and I think that, people are going to look back on Phillip Lindsay and feel as though that the Broncos may have not done right by him. Mm-hmm. People, and there's a legitimate gripe there. He was asked about last offseason, are we going to be paying Phil? He had back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons. Are the Broncos going to invest in Phil Lindsay? And what did they do? They went out into free agency and got Melvin Gordon instead. And so now all of a sudden, Phillip Lindsay takes a little bit of a backseat to Melvin Gordon, in part because Phillip Lindsay got banged up, and that's unfortunate. But it's a kind of just the nature of that position. And it was one of the concerns about Phillip Lindsay and his size coming into the pro level. He's acknowledged that he isn't the kind of running back that can run up the middle 20 times a game. So you'd have to use him in a certain way. And I like the mixture of styles between Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay, but there's an investment point there. And when you're a team that has some other needs, you already know that your quote-unquote bell cow back is going to be back here next year. You can invest in the draft in a running back. You're going to have Royce Freeman here. The room kind of comes together naturally without having to force anything. And I think the do right here at this point for Phillip Lindsay is more to let him go. And I know that that's tough for some Broncos fans to hear, but I think the do right for him here isn't so much of forcing a second-round tender on him and making him stay on an offense that clearly doesn't use him the way he needs to be. Let him go to San Francisco. Let him go to Kyle Shanahan and have a revitalized opportunity. And that is the do right for Phillip Lindsay, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think I think that's where the team needs to they need to not worry about, the perception of doing right by the player and do right by the player. Whether that's going to, what the perception or the fan perception is going to be. And, the minute that the Broncos walk away from Phil Lindsay, the people in town that hate the Broncos but claim to be, fans are going to sit there and make up these columns that, the Broncos didn't do. Who cares about that stuff? At the end of the day, is that player, were you going to hold him hostage here where he's going to get minimal carries? Is that really what you're going to do? You're going to hold him hostage for $3 million where he's going to get minimal carries because you can't figure out a way to incorporate him in your offense and go from there? That just doesn't seem right. So if they genuinely don't have a plan for how to utilize him, give him the original round and let him walk.
Exactly. And so that's where I think this is now headed. The fact that you're not going to have Melvin Gordon missing any time to start the year. He's going to be your starting running back. You can grab somebody in the draft, and they should probably do that anyways. There needs to be a little bit of an investment there. Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, Andrew Mason from DNVR joins us. Is Sam Darnold a good idea for the Broncos to target? He'll tell us next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, Andrew Mason from DNVR, thednvr.com. You made that comparison multiple times in this really great article, again, at thednvr.com, as you went and looked at whether or not it'd be worth for the Broncos to pursue Sam Darnold in a trade. And the comparison you made, of course, multiple times pointing out the Jets have been really bad, but they were worse without Darnold. And I don't know if that necessarily says great things about Darnold or just really how bad the overall team is. And I thought that when you pointed out the stats, I think this is the most eye-opening part of this whole thing and kind of how we fall in love with the potential of quarterbacks. Because you went through and he was in his 4 years, right? 54th in passer rating, 43rd in yards per attempt, 51st in completion, 43rd in touchdown pass rate, 44th in sack rate, and it just keeps getting worse. Yet there are some people that would still say Sam Darnold may be better than Drew Lock, maybe better than several quarterbacks. He hasn't gotten the opportunity. Why do you think that is?
I think what happens is that we all tend to sometimes have biases based on what we saw at first, or what we saw going into the draft. In the case of the NFL, and this is, someone like Sam Darnold, even if it doesn't work out for him, if he ends up going somewhere else, he'll get another shot at least to compete, just because he's going to have that number 3 overall pick kind of tattooed to him. And look, he's 20. He is going to be 24 years old when he takes the field at the start of this season. He is young enough to where he's got time. But I think what happens is, like, what you are in the draft, sometimes it gets tattooed to you for way too long. Sam Darnold, number 3. Drew Lock, middle of the second round, close to the middle of the second round. And it's like, Sam Darnold went number 3. Drew Lock went number 42. Darnold must be better than Drew Lock, right? Well, no. And that actually means less and less the farther that you get from the draft. And I think one reason why I don't think Sam Darnold would be a Denver Broncos, I believe there may be a team out there that gets Sam Darnold and says, okay, he's going to be the guy. I don't think if the Broncos brought in Sam Darnold, I don't think they should make him the guy. At most, he should be competing. You could argue that Drew Lock is actually a better prospect than Sam Darnold. So I wouldn't hand him the keys, and I think there'll be somebody that is willing to give him kind of more of a look than the Broncos would. And the other thing is, we kind of assume that the Jets' price for Sam Darnold could end up being the equivalent of a late first-round pick, early second-round pick. I don't think it's worth going from 9 to 23 to get Sam Darnold when I could trade for Gardner Minshew probably for a lot less if I want to bring in young competition via the trade market.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. First of all, Sam Darnold, I think if John Elway was still in charge, that would be more of a realistic thing for the Broncos, given his infatuation with Darnold. I think everybody knows that John tried to trade up for him and get him and wouldn't take that phone call because he was scared Barkley was going to go to the Browns at 4 if he moved back to 5. So, I think if you look at this and, Darnold he's younger than Locke. He's actually younger than Locke. I think a lot of people forget that. But I think in the end, you're going to find another team that will use him for reclamation project. And I would, honestly, I would be surprised if that team was not San Francisco when all is said and done. So we'll see about that and see what direction they go, if the Jets hang on to him or if they do deal him as far as that goes. And then the second part of what you just said there with Gardner Minshew, I mean, I've talked about the Broncos and what they're going to do with this veteran competition. And to me, there's two names that just leap off the page at you, Nick Foles and Gardner Minshew, two guys that are cost-controlled options that have experience, in the scheme, although Gardner doesn't have experience with Pat Shurmur. He does have experience in the West Coast offense with Jay Gruden and certainly the verbiage. I think both those guys as cost-controlled, low-cost, low-capital options seem to be the best ideas in terms of competition for Locke to me.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. And, with Foles, you can lean on the fact that, hey, if he has to come in down the stretch, Nick Foles, for whatever reason, you put him in high-leverage games, and the light clicks on in a way that it doesn't maybe for Nick Foles in September and October. And Minshew is fascinating because, and personally, why I would lean toward Minshew is I like the idea of having two guys in there pushing each other, and then if one of them if one of them gets in and hits, both of them have the potential to be a long-term answer. I think that's a really dynamic element. I know it's a young team, and maybe maybe you need the settled veteran, but maybe you can get that kind of settled veteran leadership from some other spots, especially on the defensive side, and then on offense, build around a couple of quarterbacks who. The other thing with Minshew and Locke is they've both got some flair. Both got a certain dynamic element in their personality that people gravitate to. Guys in the locker room gravitate to Drew Lock. Guys in the locker room in Jacksonville gravitate toward Gardner Minshew. And I think that's something in terms of a team developing an identity. If you had them both competing, whichever one won, I think guys would really get behind that guy and really do their best to make sure he succeeded.
Last one here for you, Mace, and really appreciate the extra time with us here tonight. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted, because this is a fascinating point you made about the 20 quarterbacks. There are 120 quarterbacks taken in the first round in the common draft era, which began in 1967. And you pointed out the 20 that didn't make it through their basically, you said the debut to the start of their fourth season. The odds are not necessarily in his favor if his team is already looking to move on from him before the fourth season.
Right. Now, one thing you can say for Sam Darnold, that clearly there have been some extenuating circumstances, especially in the last couple of years. Now, obviously, this is on the high end, but maybe he doesn't come into play because he wasn't a first-round pick. Maybe there's a little kind of a Steve Young element here, because Steve Young with Tampa Bay in the mid-1980s, an absolute disaster of a franchise, kind of like the Jets have been in recent years. And then he gets to San Francisco. They kind of take him in, get some football rehab on him. He works under Joe Montana. He works with Bill Walsh every day, and they turn him into something special.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker joins the show. He helps us break down some of the top cornerbacks in the draft. Coming up next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Let's head out to the hotline and bring on Eric Crocker, former NFL cornerback. Eric_Crocker. Fantastic work. #CrocTalk. Make sure you check it all out. Eric, it's good to have you on the program. One of the things that I was excited to bring you on because I have Jaycee Horn as my top guy, and I've been a big fan for a while. And I saw you tweeting about him a couple of weeks ago. Now it seems like there are some other guys that are starting to move up. I saw you talking about Greg Newsome. I'm excited to talk about him as well. But why, at least up to a certain point, did you have Jaycee Horn as your number one corner in this draft class?
Man, and so the first thing I try to look at, I try to identify, who the player is and some traits that you just can't teach. And I think, you can look at guys like Farley and look at, his explosiveness, right? Like that's something that stands out. That's great. But with Jaycee Horn, it's like the mental makeup. And when you look at certain guys, like, what makes Richard Sherman so great? It's not top tier athleticism, even though Jaycee Horn has that, but it's not a top end athleticism or great technique or anything like that. It's something upstairs that you can't really quantify with numbers, and Jaycee Horn has that. I had a teammate. I was on with the Jets, and he's actually been the strength and conditioning coach for South Carolina the last few years. And the first thing he said to me was alpha male, and he'll tell me about guys coming out of their school, but he was like, hey, you're gonna like this kid, Jaycee Horn, alpha male. Was the leader day one when he showed up as a true freshman, took over that defensive back room, and he's just a big dog like that, alpha male. And you see it on the field, and his just ability to take on tough assignments of, hey, Seth Williams, I'm going to guard you all game long and make life hell for you. Kyle Pitts, okay, I got to line up over you. I'm going to guard you as well. These tasks that he took on, the challenges, he didn't back down from any of it, and a lot of times took the fight the guy. So just from that standpoint, aside from everything he brings on the field, which I think is terrific, that mental makeup, man, you can't teach that. Some guys either have it or not. And when you do have a guy that has it, like a Jalen Ramsey, like even a guy like Jair Alexander, you got to kind of cover those type of guys.
All right. Well, I mean, you basically laid out exactly why I have him as my CB1 as well. But I've been a big fan of his for quite some time. I noticed you did a breakdown of Greg Newsome, and he seems like a guy that is kind of rocketing up some boards, at least in a lot of people's opinion. I know he had some great measurables in his pro day. What did you notice about Greg Newsome, and how would you, differentiate if you're looking for a boundary corner or a corner that would be kind of more like late round one? How would you differentiate between these two guys?
Oh man, watching Greg Newsome, man. When I put the film on, I finally got getting a hold of all 22. Sometimes it could be a little tough. And finally, someone sent me over 4 games from this past season, and I'm watching them, and I'm like, man, he's really good. You had me on earlier. We were talking about scheme fit, guys that could fit with the Denver Broncos. I think he's like the exactly what they're looking for. He has the size. I didn't know he was 6 foot, 6'1", 190 something pounds. Because I don't look at guys' measurables before I watch the film. But he moves like a smaller guy. The person I compared him to was Jair Alexander. Just his ability to have good feet, close with quickness. His change of direction was really good. He was scrappy. He made plays on the ball. His cockiness, his swagger in which he played with, his ability to really come down and make tackles, I thought that was really cool, where he wasn't shying away from contact. He wasn't diving at ankles. He was taking to guys' chest. So just his mentality, his movement skills, his ability, the versatility to be able to play press and off, to me that's huge because he has the feet and quickness. He can play the slot. He can play outside. There is really a lot to like about him. And I'm just now getting to him the last few days. I think right before he ran at his pro day, someone had asked me, what does he run? What do you think he's going to run? And I'm like, I think he runs fast enough. I didn't see him struggle to run with anybody. It didn't look like he was against his own ability to run with the guy. It looked almost effortless. And then he goes out there and blazes and runs in the 4.3s. And I was like, okay, yeah, this guy's big time. So one thing that was a little concerning, and it kind of got overshadowed, and it kind of shows up on tape just a little bit, was his short shuttle was 4.28. So you would like to see that down just a little bit. I wouldn't say concerning, but that was something I kind of took note of. But aside from that, I thought everything else was really good.
Okay, so you said that if you're looking for scheme fit there, that would be one for the Broncos. Would you take him over Jaycee Horn then if you are Denver?
Yeah, I think he is a better. I think he fits better for what the Broncos do. So yeah, if Fangio is still playing more of that off quarters type stuff, I think he fits that perfect. And he could be a guy like, when Fangio was with the 49ers, they had like Terrell Brown. Terrell Brown played very well. He doesn't get like a lot of love for whatever reason, but he was really good. That's what he reminded me of, like, a guy that played like that, but with more like flash, more ability, more upside than what Terrell Brown had. I would take him. They're probably not going to take him that high. I think if anything, maybe some of those injury concerns. I know he's missed a lot of games, hasn't played a whole lot of games over the 3 years. That could be one concern. But if you're just going purely off of the film, I don't see what a team that's looking for a cornerback would not like in him. He has the size, he has the speed, he has the ability, the quickness, change of direction, feet, the film, the toughness, like the swagger, like he has all that. So, I don't know what more a team would look for. And he fits your guys' scheme perfect.
Incredible stuff as always, Eric. We really appreciate the time. Inside, as always, give him a follow on Twitter at Eric_Crocker, Crocker Report, and, of course, on Twitter, #CrocTalk. Great job, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.